Hello, and welcome to another camera review. Today, I wanted to answer one of the important questions I get asked as a filmmaker: which lenses I choose for filming. And specifically, they wanted me to compare Canon lenses versus Zeiss lenses. Now, Zeiss is not Canon, or it's not a lens that was specifically made for that company. Like in the case of Sony, Sony does have collaboration with Zeiss to produce Zeiss lenses, and that in itself is a category in itself. But if you're talking about Canon lenses, should you choose to buy Canon lenses versus Zeiss lenses? Well, that's an important question that keeps coming up time after time. And I answer that in very specific terms. For example, if you are going to use it for plain photography, and if you have, for example, 85mm 1.4, it is very hard to nail that focus if you are going to do it manually, if the subject is moving. So at times, having an autofocus is very beneficial, especially if you take a lens like the 50mm 1.2. This is a very fast lens. But if you're trying to hold focus with this and of a moving subject, it will be incredibly difficult on a Zeiss lenses, which is completely manual. And manual lenses in itself is very special because it allows you to control the aperture, it allows you to control the focus by simply using manual focusing. And as you know, or you may know, that most of the times in filming or videos, they use follow focus. That way you can manually control on which subject or which point you are aiming to focus. So if you are going to use lenses that you are not going to need to use autofocus, then manual lenses becomes very favorable. Now, one of the important things to notice about, for example, Canon lenses is that they have no hard stop. So if you are going to use this, you will not have a point to start and a point to end, which means there is no hard stop at the end of one focal range, and that causes this lens to be difficult to focus manually. But having said that, there's another issue that comes up, which is the amount of focus throw. That means the amount of rotation this lens has, and is relatively small, relatively short compared to, for example, a Zeiss lens. This Zeiss lens, which is a 35mm, is a very beautiful lens, very sharp, very good. Yet this lens will require you to be very precise in your focusing. And if you are filming and you are able to focus mark your points, then a Zeiss lens is an incredibly versatile lens because it allows you a more accurate focusing. Now, if you are just going to use your camera, and now it's become more and more prevalent as far as camera manufacturers going towards having autofocus, because young vloggers or young filmmakers are looking to use cameras without having to focus with autofocus or autofocus tracking, then it is a possibility to use these lenses in less than feature films, or if you're going to do short films. But if you are going to do truly professional film, then the technology has not come to the point where you can do away with follow focus. And for that very reason, it is very, very important to know that your lens is going to give you the most accurate image by getting the right focus distance. Now, another important factor is if you look at this lens, which is a Zeiss lens, it's extremely heavy compared to, for example, the 24mm here or the 50mm. I mean, the weight difference is almost twice as heavy. And the reason for that is it's all metal construction. It has very fine glass elements in it. And this means that this is going to last you for decades. I'm not talking years, I'm talking decades. Now, most lenses that are now made, even Nikons and Canons, they're all plasticky. I mean, you could throw this and it will bounce off the wall. And for that very reason, it is not as durable. The mechanics inside are plastic. So eventually things are going to wear out. And that means they have a lifespan of maybe 3 to 5 years. You may get to use them for 10 years, but it will eventually need to go for servicing. And most of it has to do with the mechanics inside. And I'm not talking about the mechanics of the lens elements moving, but I'm talking about the ones that are for focusing, because those gears eventually weigh heavily on the structure of this lens, and eventually they wear out. Now, having said that, having a lighter lens is a definite advantage, because if you have a lighter lens, you are able to do gimbal work, and you are able to do autofocus if you are, for example, following a subject, and you will not need a third party to full focus on that subject. And it's for that reason there are pros and cons into purchasing lenses. Now, also important to consider is the Canon's optics. Now, Canon, I've used Nikons, I've used Canons, I have used even big format lenses like Leica S lenses. I have a whole collection of different lenses that I've tried, and over the decades, from trial and error, I found that Canon lenses are not the very best in terms of optics when you compare it to, for example, Zeiss lenses. And these are tested and oftentimes put on MFT charts, MTF charts, and every other possible side-by-side comparison. And if you do your own research, you will find that lenses like Zeiss have a very good track record of being the sharpest. And in fact, before anybody else, Zeiss had been producing lenses way before Leicas, way before Canons or Nikons. And it is for that very reason you have to understand that those lenses come from a heritage of know-how, and that know-how translates into better optics. Now, having said that, do remember that these lenses, most lenses that Zeiss now produces, are produced in Japan. Now, they're mostly produced by Cosina, which produces the Voigtlander lenses. Now, Voigtlanders have the most bad reputation, because the Voigtlander lenses, they sell cheap, and people think they are cheap, but they don't realize that the world's most accurate lens, which is called Zeiss Otus, is manufactured by the same company. Having said that, I would also say that this lens is good if you are going to use your camera on a stationary tripod, because stationary tripod is very important because it has no vibration reduction. And vibration reduction is an important factor in the current lenses, especially if you look at the Panasonic lenses. The Leica's collaboration with them produces the OSS, which is optical stabilization. They have in-body stabilization, but the optical stabilization in conjunction with the in-body stabilization produces a more stable shot. Now, these lenses that we are talking about, Zeiss lenses, does not have any of that. And for that very reason, you have to know that what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to take this lens handheld and expect to have a very steady shot. For that very reason, you may want to consider gimbals, you may want to consider using a steady tripod, and that is an important consideration. So this is for the big boys. And I would say using this lens as a Zeiss lens, comparing that to, for example, CP2, which is the cinema versions of these lenses, is an indication of where that technology is. If you look at Zeiss as a company, they produce anything from medical optical designs to NASA telescopes, even the cinema series. They have many lines. For example, they have the Ultras, they have the Master Primes, and they have these. Now they have come up with Milvus, which is you can put your focus follow on it without having to do major modifications. You can even put it on the Otus series as well. So that is an important consideration when you are purchasing it. So Having said that, there's some other important factors that will come into play, which is the price. Now, Zeiss lenses are not cheap, but comparing it to a Canon L lens, which is a very distinct lens, the L series, they are about the same. Sometimes Canon lenses cost more. Now, are they sharper? Not really, but they are very, very good lenses. The 85, the 50, which we both own, these lenses are very good for particular purposes. Now, would I personally purchase other than the L lenses? No, because there is a very distinct, clear, defined quality difference between the L series and anything else the Canon makes. So if you are going to make a decision on buying Canon lenses, make sure that you are investing in these lenses for long term. I mean, cameras come and go. Every year there are new cameras being announced. Technology moves in, and the HD goes to 4K. We had 24 frames, now we got up to 60 frames. That is all going to go forward, but the lens technology in itself will remain there for years to come. So it is very, very, very important that when you are investing, to invest in the right lens. Now, I own this 24 millimeter. I shot a film using this and a feature film, and it's got good results because I looked at the sharpness, it worked. I used it on a gimbal, it worked, and I would personally wouldn't mind using some of these lenses on occasion, but generally 90% of my shoots would require lenses of highest quality. And of that, I mean using lenses from Zeiss, Leica, and anything that I find to be unique. And that does not mean that they have to be expensive. I mean, they have some very, very good Nikon lenses from 20, 30 years ago that are still very good. And you can put an adapter, use it on a Canon. Similarly, there are Canon FD lenses, which are very, very cheap. And some of them are very good. It does not mean that the lens have to be expensive, but it does mean that the lens have to be of good quality. Now, we can talk more and more about these lenses, but for now, I would say make the right decision by investing in good quality lenses. You don't need all of them. Just buy one or two to start with. Develop your skill set, develop your lens set, and eventually you will have a very good collection. And that is the worthwhile investment, and that's the best advice I can give to any filmmaker or anyone who's starting in the business. And I hope you have enjoyed this review, and I look forward to seeing you in our next review. Please do remember to hit that like button and maybe make a donation, which is under the description section, and please subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you.